All right. Well, I came across a pretty interesting blog post today by Mr. Ralph Ammer, um, and it dives into Immanuel Kant's philosophies, which I'm not too familiar about. So thought it was interesting. I started reading through it at work, and I realized, oh, okay, this is something I should probably be paying more attention to. So saved it for tonight to kind of deep dive into. Um, all right, let's get into it. Immanuel Kant, what can we know? Let's find out, Ralph. You tell us. If you're interested in truth, be it in the form of scientific knowledge or artistic beauty, there's no way around Immanuel Kant's critique of pure reason. In this book, Kant asks the simple question, what can we know? And his answer is foundational to how we experience and understand the world today. Should we think or should we look? Before we delve into Immanuel Kant's solution, I'm just going to say Kant instead of Immanuel Kant. It's just easier. Let's have a quick look at two opposing philosophical views of his time. Rationalism. It's all in our head. One position, which is often attributed to rationalists like René Descartes, considers our rational thinking as the source of all knowledge. Our senses might betray us, but our rational mind is reliable, perhaps because it was created by a higher power. It's interesting that he's throwing that in there. I mean, pretty sure Kant was raised very religiously. And so, yeah, he's definitely injecting that into his philosophy, which is pretty controversial among, currently with in the philosophical world. I think there's kind of a split, but I mean, when is there ever not? Uh, anyways, an opposing view, usually associated with empiricists like David Hume, suggests that our minds are somewhat empty. Everything we must know must have entered through our senses first. Reading through this, it kind of reminds me a lot about introverts and extroverts. Um, in fact, I kind of see introverts and extroverts more in this light as opposed to the classical, oh, if you get more energy from being around people, you're probably an extrovert, vice versa, meaning an introvert. Um, to me, this actually makes a little more sense. Rationalism being more introverted and empiricism being more extroverted. You know, I've always seen introverts as people who kind of absorb a lot of data and they kind of compare it against their personal experiences. I know that's not exactly what this is talking about, but forget the article for a second. We're going off track. They kind of have their own personal opinions. They kind of input data from the outer world, and they're like, nope, that doesn't match what I have. Let me change the environment, push myself away, sort of um, adjust so that I need to kind of fit in a little bit. Whereas extroverts might say, this is the world around me. Let me go out into it and explore and kind of morph into that, what I'm observing. So not exactly what they're getting at, but just a little side thought. Anyways, we must observe the outside world to learn what's going on. All right, our minds shape the world. So rationalists think that our mind is built to understand the world through rational thinking from the inside. Empiricists believe that we learn about the world through observation from the outside. Both groups assume that our mind somehow adjusts to the world around us. Okay? Immanuel Kant turns this around. Ooh, it's getting interesting. He says it's not our mind that adjusts to the world adjusts to our mind. In other words, how we see the world is shaped by how we see and think. We cannot know how the world as it truly is because we can only experience it through our senses and thoughts. Our mind filters and shapes what we can know about the world, so we must understand how our mind works. And this is what Kant's book is about. It's conveyed in a very interesting way, and I can sort of think of what he's getting at, but I'd like to see exactly the direction he's going with this explanation. So let's continue. We look and think. Kant agrees with empiricists that we need observations from the outside. He also agrees with rationalists that the mind must structure these observations. And this is how sensibility and understanding work together. Okay? To me, nothing controversial has been said so far. Not that there needs to be, but he's introducing new concepts into this. So let's get into it. Sensibility. Let's start with our senses. All we get is raw data from the outside world. This data does not mean anything yet. Okay? It's a bunch of bits and pizzas out there. Pieces, not pizzas. I mean, they could be little pizzas, but right. Thus, the first thing our sensibility does is to structure that data in space and time. According to Kant, we don't know whether space and time are properties of the outside world, but they sure are part of our mind. Remember his premise that the perceived world adjusts to our mind? Yeah, it's our sensibility that uses time and space to filter and structure what we observe. Kant says that even mathematics is based on these two pure forms of intuition, where arithmetic is related to time and geometry to space. Okay? Understanding. The problem with these impressions, even after they are structured in time and space, there are simply too many and they're too chaotic. So now it is up to the understanding to reduce and organize this raw input. How? We combine many similar impressions into one object. Interesting. Okay. We can take this even further. When we see many objects with similar properties, we can name them. For example, as a cup. We have thereby grouped many impressions under one concept. A concept is a representation that unifies a group of phenomena. To understand something means to recognize relationships through concepts. We can now formulate judgments like the cup is on the table. Our understanding determines how we form and connect such concepts. We do this according to certain rules, which Kant calls categories of understanding. These 12 categories include, for example, the recognition of causal relationships, like if I drop the cup, then it will break. What makes our insights objective, says Kant, is that every act of understanding must follow these categories. The categories and how our mind applies them are the reliable constant that makes objective knowledge possible. Let's keep in mind, we do not have direct access to things in themselves, but we do have access to the intuitions, which they invoke in our sensibility. We combine these intuitions of the world with our concepts of thinking, and this is how we arrive at insights of the world. Look at that. But the story is not over yet. One of the first things I try to implement when I've switched careers in the past is to try to build a mental map or a mental model of the organization, right? Obviously, this is done by anyone who works at a job, right? Just by virtue of being there, you learn the functions, you learn how everything works, but I think this is the most important thing whenever you're entering a new environment, whether it be work or not, is to make a conscious effort to learn the organizational structure, because that allows you to kind of understand the importance of each task you have, even though it might not be relevant to you, right? Learning the other functions allows you to know your place within the big picture, and it allows you that much more to make meaningful impact. So that's what I'm thinking about as I'm reading this, and I think it's a universal application to things. This is conveying it in a much more technical way, but it's good. What we cannot understand, I can already tell where this is going. Okay, I'm interested. Our understanding tempts us to think beyond what we can perceive. We can think about thinking. Kant calls this reason. It's pretty meta. Not really, but in rather poetic terms, I think that's how people would describe it now, is meta, right? Just because the term has become so prominent. In rather poetic terms, he describes our mind as an island, which we can map out clearly. This island is placed in an ocean of unknown things in themselves, and is fed by waves of data and forms its own insights. Whoops, sorry. read that very poorly. But the core of this island is reason. And it is not satisfied with this limited existence. For instance, we might want to know the infinity of space, or how an infinite space is even possible. And if it is not infinite, then what is beyond its borders? When did the time start? Is there a cosmic principle that unites everything, such as God? Kant says we can ponder these metaphysical questions, but the tragedy is we can never answer them with certainty. There are mirages out there in the ocean, and we can never know. There is no solid ground beyond our little island. What can we know, and how? Finally, we can get to Kant's answer. When we gain insights about the world, we receive input from the outside and then actively structure it using a fixed set of principles or categories of understanding. We need both, perceptions from the outside and the ability to order and unify them in our mind. Or as he puts it, thoughts without content are empty. Institutions without concepts are blind. I like that. There are things, though, that are beyond the understanding of this apparatus, like the infinite cosmos or the soul of God. One of the cool things about Kant is that he has integrated a huge amount of philosophical thought into a coherent system. So while he was contributing some of the most original ideas, he has structured and connected existing ideas by other great thinkers. That was not the way to read that sentence. I'm going to redo that. So while he was contributing some of the most original ideas, he also structured and connected existing ideas by other great thinkers. And this magnificent system, whether we agree with it or not, has become a monumental bedrock for inquiries into the nature of knowledge in science, art, and of course, the current endeavors of artificial intelligence. In another book, The Critique of Judgment, Kant connected our search for understanding with how we find beauty in the world. But let's save his views on beauty for another day. One more thing. Mr. Ralph has oversimplified Kant's book here to an almost questionable extent, trying to pack it into a couple of paragraphs with some cute illustrations. They were actually very good. The Critique of Pure Reason is a fantastically complex and rich book. I'll take your word for it. You can spend a lifetime exploring this monument, and in fact, many people have. My intent here is not to provide you with a complete understanding of this book. I couldn't, even if I tried. The best I can hope for is to whet your appetite to embark on the adventure of reading it yourself. Thank you very much. That was a pretty cool read. Can definitely compare it to, observations in my own life. Definitely not that I've conveyed it like this or thought much into it, such as he pointed out, but it was cool. Yeah. Hope that was entertaining or insightful or interesting to any of y'all. So I'll end it there.